He hasn't done anything.
We need some music, by the way.
He's just pitching.
No music, no intros.
We need intro
so we
music.
Get, copyright strikes.
We're never gonna get shouted out by the president at an EO signing ceremony if we don't get some fucking intro music. Is all I'm saying.
This guy wants to be the All-In podcast so badly. Hello, everyone. This is episode 55 of the Three Body Problem. Checking in from Washington D.C. from home. Juanito.
What's up, man?
I don't know what he's stressing about. He wants to be on an executive order. How are you, buddy?
I've been on enough executive orders as far as I'm concerned. We're good.
Costin is on vacation in Greece, but actually brought his microphone along, and he's all set up and ready to go. How are you, my friend?
Pretty good. Look, the microphone is sitting on a fish. You see?
See the things we do for you?
Resourcefulness is what it is.
The things we do for this audience. Quick update, quickly. Juanito and I will be live in Las Vegas on during the Black Hat Week. If you would like an invite to a live recording of this podcast, hit us up. You know how to find us. We'll also be at Countermeasures in Ottawa in November 3 to the 7th as part of the Ring Zero training thing there. Super excited, looking forward to that. And let's start the show. Last week, right as we put up our episode, we got news of Microsoft Sharepoint zero-day exploitation in the wild. Costin, you want to kick us off and give us a kind of like just a quick overview and timeline of what the big findings were. We're about a week into it. A lot of people, Microsoft has already shipped a patch. People have already been mitigating. Fill us in on what happened.
Well, first of all, I don't think the whole story passed. I think we're probably in the middle of the storm, and come next week, this will be exploited by pretty much every ransomware group out there. The only kind of, I don't know, compensation or, kind of reassurance would be that maybe not that many people have SharePoint running on the internet just like that. I mean, why would you put a SharePoint server? It makes no sense to put a SharePoint server on the internet. Like, just for historical reasons, I think SharePoint is 24 years old, and it was originally created. It was never intended to be on the internet. It was always designed to be within the local network, to be used by bigger corporations. NSA, of course, I guess, was using SharePoint, and we know that very well. And yeah, I mean, it was never intended to be on the internet. So if you have a SharePoint server on the internet, my first advice is don't put it on the internet. It was never designed to be on the internet for many reasons. And
the vulnerabilities themselves only affected on-prem installations of SharePoint. Explain what you mean by being on the internet.
Yeah, like if you run your own SharePoint server, which there's a lot of good reasons not to put your SharePoint stuff in the cloud, so you want to run it on-prem, don't let it like just openly accessible from the internet. Put it behind the VPN, put it within your local network, and only allow VPN authenticated users to reach your SharePoint server. Don't just let it sit somewhere, on the internet. That's one thing. The other thing is SharePoint is super popular. I mean, even we at our old job, we were being forced to use SharePoint. I'm trying to struggle. I struggle remembering anyone who loved SharePoint. I mean, everyone hated SharePoint. How you had to put like your weekly progress and all those things. Everything had to be in SharePoint.
MBOs by SharePoint.
MBOs by SharePoint. Everything had to be in SharePoint. It was terrible, honestly.
Is any of this shit enjoyable though? Like, are people happier with Confluence or whatever bullshit everybody uses?
It's a new SharePoint.
It's shifted into these new tools, Notion, all these different types of tools that people can use to do the documentation and so on. SharePoint is a replica from a previous era that somehow survives, right? Why do people use SharePoint today?
I asked my wife. They use SharePoint in their company, and I asked like, "Why do you use SharePoint?" She said like, "We have no idea. We have to. Like, it's the only option. We have no other option.
It's just legacy shit left over.
The only
right?
option." What's that?
It's like legacy stuff left over from a previous era in some old Windows shops that they're trying to like, I don't know why you'd be using SharePoint in this day and age. This batch of vulnerabilities have a history.
Government organizations, right? Like, I think in many ways we're being, like, SharePoint is something that is being inflicted on people. But it's also the kind of organizations that are very unlikely to do any kind of shifting, right? Like if you started with this thing set up sort of externally facing, the chances that you're going to stop anything to make that change are unlikely.
Zero.
The chances that you're patching that thing well are unlikely. But I think so. I don't want to stop you. You were going to like introduce more about the vuln itself, but
I was just going to say the biggest story here.
Right?
Yeah, I was going to say the biggest story here is not necessarily the zero-day exploitation of a vulnerability by nation-state actors. That shit happens all the time. The biggest story here is, well, two things. One is the life of this issue that began in May at Pwn2Own Berlin conference, where the vulnerabilities were first exploited and demonstrated. That's one issue. And then there's another larger issue around Microsoft's problems with patching. They're constantly issuing faulty patches. People are constantly evading and just kind of like, moving a bit here and moving a bit there and being able to bypass their patches and doing these vulnerabilities. It seems like they struggle very much with the quality of their patches, and it's come back to bite them. We've had multiple examples in the past. So let me start with the May 2025, the first time these things were first demonstrated by Viettel Cybersecurity, Vietnamese company that had their researchers participate at Pwn2Own Berlin. Pwn2Own Berlin is one of these hacking contests where people kind of show off their latest and greatest. Costin, can you walk me through a little bit of like the early beginnings of this? Who is this Viettel Cybersecurity people?
Viettel is an interesting conglomerate. First of all, they're something pretty big, one of the largest telecom operators in Vietnam and contractor for the Ministry of Defense. And the Viettel Cybersecurity was initially part of Viettel, and I think that recently they were spun into a separate, quite successful, by the way, company, and respected all over the world for their red teaming work and vulnerability research and so on. And as we can see, obviously, they participate in competitions like Pwn2Own Berlin, and they are
good
like
advertising, right, for their skills and their abilities.
I think finding this bug is the best advertisement they can get. And their researcher, Dean Juan, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, reported this at Pwn2Own in May. In my opinion,
a chain with two separate bugs, right?
Of two separate bugs. Now they're known as CVE 2025 49704 and 706. And it took Microsoft about 2 months for them to release patches, which in my opinion, it's a bit strange that it took that long considering the potential for abuse. So the first weird thing in this story is that it takes Microsoft 2 months to patch them. And they do push patches for this in July, on July the 8th. And only a week later, on July 14, security researchers from Code White GmbH, a German company, they post on Mastodon on InfoSec Exchange that they were able to publicly reproduce the exploitation chain. So this is an interesting moment on July 14th when they push this on the information. I guess a lot of other researchers, when they see this is happening, they start probably poking at the code, poking at the patches just to understand what's happening. And then July 18, although Sentinel-1 says they first saw the signs on July 17th, which is super interesting in my opinion, as most of the others, I think including Microsoft, they said July 18th, 19th, so somehow Sentinel-1 has a bit better visibility here. Finally, the evidence emerges that this is being exploited in the wild by what is now known as at least three different suspected Chinese APT or targeted attack groups. At least 2 of them are for sure APT. The third group also does ransomware. So that's kind of, let's say, a bit unusual. But again, to see what's happening here, on July 18-19, although the bug was patched by Microsoft, remember on July the 8th, the new exploit attempts are basically bypassing Microsoft's patch because there's 2 new CVEs, CVE 2025 53770 and 771. That simply
they are
just
both bypasses for the previous 2 that you discussed,
correct.
right?
And the bypasses, not only that, but the bypasses are kind of trivial. Like for instance,
very trivial.
53770 is
One
just
byte
adding a
trivial.
slash. You add a slash and poof, suddenly you bypass the patch, which in my opinion, it's a bit silly. And by the way, there's a very interesting and thorough analysis by our friend Boris Larin. I think they have a very interesting analysis of these bypasses and the root cause for the bug that you can look up.
They also
And-
mention a fifth bug, right?
And they mention exactly, and I was about to say that they also mention an interesting fifth bug, which is not mentioned actually in any other blog or paper. And in particular, that's a 2020 vulnerability that resembles these implementations, like the new exploit code, very, very well. So he kind of suggests that whoever implemented these new things, they kind of got inspired. And not only that, but the new patches also kind of update the patch for that 2020 vulnerability as well. So it's like a super more complete patch that Microsoft finally publishes again on July 19. Yes,
They get a
new
working
patch, the patch for the
they get a
patch, the
working,
second patch.
They had 2 months for one patch, and then that one byte just like oof, just got in the way, and then
And we've seen this in the past with Microsoft. They've struggled with this print nightmare. They struggled with a lot of auto patching where they're constantly kind of repatching and saying this is an update for a previous patch, all because people are just reversing and exposing the fact that they're struggling to patch these things. Juan, I want to focus in a little bit on the mistake Microsoft threat intelligence team actually named. Costin mentioned it, but named these Chinese nation state actors. 2 of them are Linen Typhoon and Violet Typhoon. So we got some weather patterns here. Quickly, can we put that into context? Who are these typhoons? How does the rest of us know them? Harmonize them for me.
I mean, they've been around since 2015. I think Microsoft was part of that bullshit initiative with CrowdStrike, right?
Harmonize them for me, yes.
No, fuck you. They're supposed to harmonize them, right? Like, I'm not a part of this group. They never invited me to be a part of their naming fix initiative. So, no, I'm not the one supposed to be harmonizing. I'm sure they forgot. They were fixing the patch, and they forgot their little initiative, and any minute now. Actually, Costin, tell me, man, like, you figured out what 2 of those were. It's like 27?
27 and
30?
31.
31.
Supposedly.
Yeah. I hate the numbers, but
being one of my oldest friends, I mean, I've been following 27 for ages, in all their different forms and all their like change of tool sets over the years. And to be honest, it makes sense of them to exploit this because, for instance, they've been exploiting a lot of other bugs, like, for instance, the exchange, the big exchange 0-day that Orange Tsai found back in the days. APT27 was exploiting this all over the Middle East. They were like everywhere with that, as well as in Europe. So maybe not a surprise. And APT31 also, remember, I think it's one of the original groups who was also exploiting that exchange 0-day back in the days. So maybe not a surprise that it's these 2 groups, if we are to believe again the equivalence and the harmonization of all things. Then there's of course this 3rd group, which is a bit more mysterious. I don't know how Microsoft separates between these exploitation attempts. I did like, however, in the Sentinel-1 blog, you guys, you Juan, actually, you guys talk about the super no shell activity cluster. To me, that seemed the most interesting. So maybe you want to talk about that a bit.
So so we'd seen 3 clusters. I actually have no idea how they align with some of the Microsoft stuff. I'm going to go back to the guys that were working on this. You've got Simon Kennan and Jim Walter and Tom Hagel. So this actually, you see Simon, like, this comes out of like our threat hunting guys and DR guys, who were kind of dealing with the general exploitation. And what we end up seeing is 3 clusters, which we kind of focus on what the web shell is, essentially, to try to cluster some of this stuff. But the really interesting one, which I just confirmed, because you mentioned sort of the 17th with us being like a little earlier, and like the no shell cluster The one that is not
The
dropping a
best.
shell at all, the more interesting one that's like staying memory resident, is the one that had the vuln from July 17th, at least as far as we see. And so what's really interesting about this is instead of them dropping a web shell like these other folks are doing, which is what we were using to cluster this other activity, they're staying completely memory resident. They're doing some like in-memory.net execution of modules and like trying to just avoid basic artifacts. So I'm wondering if that's why other folks kind of missed that the earlier exploitation. At the same time, I said earlier that this feels like Hafnium 2.0, and I mean that I'm using terms I don't want to be using, right? Because I don't mean Hafnium the group. I mean like the proxy logon shit show that starts as around the discovery and use of like Hafnium using the proxy logon vulns first, and then the shit show that comes with everybody else getting access to the same vulns, and you have like a bunch of Chinese APT teams and then a bunch of ransomware crews, as Costin said. So we're in a similar situation. I'm not saying this involves Hafnium the APT. I think this is just looking very similar. Like you have an on-prem Microsoft thing with an RCE vuln that somehow gets out there a little sooner. That's being used earlier, abused earlier in some kind of parallel discovery. And whatever this no-shell group is, whether it aligns with the Storm 2630 or not, I don't think so, because we don't see the ransomware deployment coming off of this no-shell part. They start out first being the more stealthy one, and then all of a sudden you see these other APTs and then these other groups sort of like laying into it. So Costin's right. We're right in the middle of the storm. Like this is, depending on the level of exposure and how quickly these things get patched, this is going to be like one of those vulns that are just going to get hammered until the victims run out, essentially.
But by the way, I think there's also an important method of exploitation here, which takes advantage of one of the Sharepoint internals. So when you run Sharepoint in a cluster, and it makes sense to do that, for all sorts of reasons like reliability, or if you have like a really large Sharepoint database and you want it spread across a cluster of servers, there's a kind of early 2000s version of doing secure things, or like doing things securely, if you want, through something called the machine key, which is essentially like kind of a shared secret between all members of the cluster. So what happens here is that these attackers are trying to steal the machine key, and the moment they do that, that kind of allows them to come back into that machine, even if it was patched. So the patch doesn't change the machine key. So when you get your hands on the machine key and there's code, I've seen ASP code, which simply dumps this machine key for the attackers, you can just come back. So good luck. I mean, you patched your server.
And there's evidence that that's what they're doing, right? They're going after those keys.
Yeah. So what you actually need to fix this 24 years old security nightmare is to do a couple of things. First, you need to patch with the latest patch. Then, if you don't restart, it doesn't matter. So you need to restart IIS. Because if you don't restart IIS, and actually the automatic patches, they don't restart IIS. So the servers will remain vulnerable like forever unless you restart. And after
until morale improves.
Until morale improves. If you restart, then it's still not enough. You need to change this secret. You change the machine key. Microsoft has PowerShell code, or you can do it from, I think, in a few other ways to change this machine key, which most likely was already stolen if you were on the internet with your SharePoint.
Why isn't Microsoft communicating this? Because Microsoft's big guidance is just go patch. Patches are available. We got all the patches. We're on top of it. Go patch. But like patching is not the mitigation here.
We're in the middle of the Microsoft storm as well, right? Right now, first they said they patched it, then they had to fix the patch, then they claimed they were on top of all the activity. Soon we will reach the Hafnium stage of, well, if you just get off on-prem and upgrade to SharePoint, then you're good, right? And we're almost at the end of the Microsoft marketing
Juanito,
strategy.
you're joking about this, but this is like
What else am I gonna do?
Yeah, this is I mean, it brings me back. Gosh, it brings me back to my just lack of confidence in anything security related coming out of Microsoft. Even though they own the messaging that they have the best security team, we know a bunch of people there at Microsoft who are like premium people there. But at the same time, we continue to get the ProPublica piece of the digital Chinese escorts in China, like having access to U.S. Department of Defense data, and Microsoft aware of it, but for business purposes, they moved ahead. We got this faulty patching nightmare. We got Hi-Fi Lee on Twitter constantly complaining about trying to report Microsoft Office vulns to the MSRC and giving him, like throwing all the onus on him to reproduce it. It just feels like. And this is all in the midst of a Secure Futures initiative that is, we got 25 deputy CISOs now. Everything is under control. We're on top of things. And then constantly, week after week after week, you and I, we're on this podcast. Others are discussing this kind of thing. There's a larger issue here around just trusting Microsoft to get any of this right. They've had SharePoint for 25 years. They've had an MSRC and a security program, a prominent security program for all these years. Is this something that you just can't get on top of? Am I being unfair to Microsoft?
No, I don't think you're being unfair to Microsoft. I'm sure Microsoft would say otherwise, but you just touched on a series of points, and I think they're all important and they're all very valid. But I'd like to separate sort of like Microsoft's executives' approach to security and the decisions that get made at that level from MSRC and what's happening at MSRC and like their management of vulnerabilities. For the MSRC one, I would point everybody to Naraine's keynote at Echo Party, I want to say 2 years ago, that addresses some of the evolution at MSRC and some of the changes. And I think it is really notable. It's not just to toot Ryan's horn, because he will never tell you. He probably won't even put the link in the description. But it was a really good way of like approaching sort of this idea of like, look at how things have evolved at Microsoft as far as security goes. And it's notable to look at how essentially Microsoft was the pioneer, particularly under the Katie Masuris days, of approaching vulnerabilities in a better way, approaching vuln developers and vulnerability researchers as human beings and collaborators, and kind of embracing the notion, right? You create the bug bounties, you try to get ahead of certain incentive structures, and a big part of that was, okay, we're going to ask people for all these vulns. How are we really, how are we going to get ahead of them? How are we going to fix them? How do you do? There's a relationship management element to it, which is not easy, right? Like vuln researchers, like the rest of us in the security space, are particular creatures. Maybe they're even more particular in some cases than others. But the bigger problem here is actually that validating vulnerabilities is hard work. It's something that we talked about in particularly when we were talking about the NVD, the National Vulnerability Database, and like what's going to happen there, and why don't other people do it, and why doesn't government just keep footing the bill on this one? It is really hard work to validate vulns. It's slightly easier when they're scoped down to your company, but you're still talking about a certain amount of setup and all these things that have to go into replicating these things. So there's all this work that had to go into building up MSRC. And sort of building up the right culture to make it work, the right set of incentives. And then what you see is, I think there's an era, I don't know the years, I don't know how to time it, because it really wasn't my time, but there's an era where MSRC gets its shit very together, and people seem very happy, at least to some degree, with their ability to like send stuff to Microsoft and get things patched. And we were getting all these like great events at Black Hat where like you could see the community had developed around Microsoft's approach to security. And then there's a backslide. Am I wrong, Ryan? I'm not saying that's where we're at now. I'm just saying like there was a time when shit looked decent at Microsoft.
When they threw marketing dollars behind an influence campaign. My argument in the Echo Party keynote was that none of this changed. They had put a nice sheen on it. They had put lipstick on the pig. But over the years, we've seen these examples of these faulty things, these they were constantly complaining about people going public with vulnerabilities, even at that time. Like even at the time when Katie Masouris and all our friends were like active in the industry and Microsoft was sponsoring conferences, and you kind of felt that they were like the trendsetter in security and how things were going to be done. They were still Microsoft. There was still bullshit happening. They were still fighting with people. I used in the keynote the example of, you know, Cesar Cerudo and some of the old guys from Core Security in Argentina and what they had to deal with. Even during that time, there were a lot of threats. There was a lot of budget decisions made where certain companies didn't get contracts because they were too critical, like all of that stuff. So I'm just putting it into context that yes, you're right. Yeah. But a lot of that was just money sheen thrown on it. Like Katie Masouris will tell you, all of that stuff was funded by their marketing budget. It was all marketing output to be part of this community type, MSRC type thing. All of that fell apart over the years. But anyway, go ahead.
No, I defer to you and, of course, to Katie completely on that. And I never got the sense that things were great, right? That they had cracked it. But I got the sense that MSRC improved to a point where they were better than they are today. And I think that's the big point is they were
better than the rest. So I think because the rest was so terrible that Microsoft doing any sort of like pre-advisories instead, like pre-patch advisories, for instance, so some of the innovative things they did in the early days had to be followed by the Oracles and the other vendors. So you give them credit for like trend setting some of that stuff. But at the same time, this is the world's biggest company with the most resources.
I think this is an area where I admonish us as part of the security industry in that we tend to be, I think, too critical when we look at somebody like Microsoft didn't stumble into being better than the rest. People worked very hard, like Katie, to force Microsoft to act less shitty. True. And they didn't nail it, as in they didn't figure everything out. They didn't get their every executive out of their own way. They didn't somehow change the culture forever, but they clearly improved. And I think it's really important to note when people improve, whether it's for marketing, whether it's wherever the dollars come from, because now they're backsliding and they have backslid a lot. So that time of improvement is something, A, to yearn for, B, clearly not a permanent state. It wasn't something that like, oh, we've reached improvement, we will never move backwards, right? Like that's a mistake we tend to make in the tech sector because we seem to think that development is about improvement, is basically about discovery of the furthest possible extension of what we know and can do. And surely it's just a matter of discovering a better way to do things that's keeping us from improving. And that's completely false. And you can see it in the security space most of all. There were better security solutions for certain things 10 years ago than there are today. So that notion that we're just like that products and the security industry are always operating at the forefront of what technology allows is simply false. That's a lie we've told ourselves. And similarly in security, I don't know how much, if any of this had anything to do with technological development. It had a lot to do with culture. And what's obvious is the hackers came into Microsoft and they raged and did their best to improve this fucking Soviet bureaucracy. And the hackers are now gone for the most part, and it seems like the culture is settling right back into to being very comfortable with a lot of shitty bullshit practices that keep blowing up in their faces. And I'm glad they're at least blowing up in their faces, but I am really disturbed because this isn't like the revelation that MSRC is in a shit place. We've been talking about this for years now, for literally years of like, hey, really good vuln researchers that are known, that have worked with Microsoft before, say that they can't get vulns patched by Microsoft. We're getting all these broken patches from Microsoft. We're having a really hard time getting any semblance of accountability or sharing for certain types of threats. There have been times when it has become evident that Mystic has visibility, for example, into a bunch of PSOAs that nobody else was seeing. They didn't share with anybody else, and when folks started to figure it out, they stonewalled it. So there's a lot of ways in which you look at the culture at Microsoft, which is, to me, that has nothing to do with whether people are doing their work and like really want to work or not. This has to do with the leadership and what the leadership allows. And it's clear that the leadership has no appreciation for the intrinsic value of security as a practice, and seems to have come to some very interesting choices about what their investments are worth and what matters in the security space.
And constantly trotting out updates to their Secure Futures initiative that everything is hunky-dory and we're hitting all our targets and we're right. I remind people that the Secure Future initiative at Microsoft was born out of a CSRB report that skewered this culture that you're talking about, like completely skewered them. They responded by saying, okay, we're going to restructure. We bring in a new CISO. We'll have a bunch of deputy CISOs and we'll do this. We'll add some cloud things we'll add, and they've been updating saying, but in the meantime, in the background, all this shit keeps popping up. Again, shout out to ProPublica, because I feel like there's no real journalism happening in this space, and those guys are like among the few that's happening. Just to circle back, Costin, do we know anything about victimology here? Like, who are the targets? Who are the victims? What do we know?
So from what I've seen from the public blogs, and by the way, I was thinking that at this point, if you're a security company and you don't have a blog on this, you're probably falling behind. So I think pretty much all the big security companies should have some sorts of blog on this, talking about their visibility, about the victims, and their, I think very important, their recommendations.
Which is the best one you saw?
The best blog, or you mean the best?
Out of the security vendors, who deserves some credit for like the way they?
Obviously, the one from SentinelOne is unique in a way because they talk about this
You're
group.
Sucking up to him.
No,
thank you guys, thank you so much.
No, seriously, because like nobody else talks about the group who exploited this on the 17th without files in memory, like super high-end, super stealthy. Everyone else talks about 18s plus. So. Yeah, the SentinelOne, definitely take a look at that. Fantastic research. I like the Boris Larin's research, and also ESET. I think they published an interesting blog.
I haven't seen the ESET one.
Wait a second. Boris Larin is our old friend from Kaspersky Great Team. Let's give the guys a credit. And they have a new blog up on Secure List about tool shell, explaining it. And he also makes the point there very, very clearly that this thing has a long tail coming. Very, very easy to exploit. Complete takeover of the server. Costin mentioned the key stuff. The fact that these things are very, very slow to patch. Vendors are companies are very, very slow to patch. So there's going to be a long tail of this thing there. Sorry, go ahead on the ESET.
Yeah. On ESET, I also think they have an interesting blog with some good IOCs in there. So overall, if you read everything that is available, I think the victimology obviously depends on everyone's visibility. So the US for sure, but then, for instance, Kaspersky talks about victims in Russia, victims in Africa as well. So I think it depends on everyone's visibility, but in the end, you can expect to be very closely related to who is running these SharePoint servers on the internet. So that would be either big corporations, I think that's a top target, and potentially governments, small, medium businesses probably as well. And that should be probably across all the sectors out there. So I've seen like mentions of telecommunications, I've seen mentions of energy, of government, of defense. So yeah, it can be pretty widespread.
Installations.
Nuclear installations.
Guys, like on this one, I think victimology has to be approached in a different way, right? Like what we're talking about here is essentially, this is the one of those like mother of all opportunistic attack situations.
Right, but Chinese nation states are not going to be opportunistic. They were clearly targeting.
No. Wait. The timeline is everything here. In the sense of this is the nature of this event is very different the earlier you go, and opportunists like the basically targeting as far as victimology only matters up until the point where the exploit starts proliferating. And then it's just opportunistic, right? Like what it matters, the reason I'm like fixating on this no-shell thing, at least in like my internal discussions, is whomever was exploiting this on the 17th, 18th, or if there is such a thing as before, that's where you're going to see targeting. That's where you're going to see carefulness. And that's where it matters who they were going after, because they clearly were jealously guarding something that other people didn't have, and they were trying to take advantage of it. So who did they go after at that time? The minute this becomes, starts proliferating beyond 1 or 3 original threat clusters, the minute you see ransomware hitting the streets through it, then targeting does not matter anymore. In my view, it's just opportunism. It's what is out there that's available to be exploited. And that's why I said, like earlier, I joked, but like the long tail of this is as long as there are people, basically victims to be hacked. Because why wouldn't you? You're telling me that there's an internet-facing server that's sitting there with an exploitable vulnerability. Why the fuck wouldn't I hit it? Right? And why wouldn't it get hit? Not by one, but by every single actor. So basically, this is going to happen until the ransomware crews force these SharePoint servers to get upgraded or to get taken off the internet. Like that's it.
And everyone changes all those keys that are being snapped.
Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to mention, since in the narrative about MSRC, and also the credit to Kaspersky, to Boris's blog, was there mention of the CVE 2020-1147, which I thought was super interesting insofar as like when we're talking about how MSRC is doing and what's happening at Microsoft. Like you're talking, is this like a full-on regression, or is this just like hey, same style of attack and they did? But I don't know, Ryan, if you comfortable introducing that one?
The Boris Laurin connects all of this back to CVE 2020-1147, which is a remote code execution vulnerability in .NET framework, Microsoft SharePoint, and Visual Studio when the software fails to check the source markup of XML file input. Why did he connect those two things, Costin? I think the point he was making is that this triggers a memory of this previous 5-year-old thing. Juanito is suggesting that maybe all this new stuff is a regression of that 2020 thing. Is that the point he's making, or is he just kind of finding similarities?
What I would say is, but there's something that happens a lot in this field, which is when you research something, you immediately, this reminds me of that thingy.
Blood in the water, yeah.
Yeah, it happens a lot. And sometimes it's either because like the same guy wrote the exploit, or it's like the same people who researched that vulnerability and ended up implementing an exploit for it. Or simply that people, they learn from older exploits. They look at older exploits to learn how to code and how to exploit new ones. And they
as a researcher, when you're looking at it, is it naturally comes easy, or do you have it comes instantly, right?
The best researchers in the field are those who remember all these things. So whenever they look at something new, they immediately connect it to
You notice how he's calling himself the best, right, Juanito? Because by the way, that is what Costin is revered and known for, the ability to recollect something from 2018, a piece of code on a piece of file or something.
We're looking at Hugh. This is the first time we open a sample ever, and he looks at it and goes, that string was in a 2017 sample of Chinese Lucky Mouse. And you go, thanks, man.
Speaking of Lucky Mouse, by the way, you mentioned APT31. ESET were the only folks who can harmonize this to Lucky Mouse. So can you guys confirm that this is actually what we've previously known and documented as Lucky Mouse?
I'm hoping Costin can, but I see him
frozen.
Lose him? He's been frozen. The minute we started to call him out on giving him credit, he froze. So the Greek internet is not having it. My understanding is yes, but this is
he's back.
Costin. Nope, he dropped.
Disappeared. Go ahead.
Fair enough. My understanding is, according to Costin and to ESET, is this APT31 is there, then APT27, this Storm 2630. And then whatever we're calling sort of our no-shell cluster.
Where are you getting 30 from?
2603. Dude, this is why I don't like the numbers. My memory is really good with names. It is
This
The
is why I
numbers are
laugh at you
just
motherfuckers when you complain about this stuff. I'm like,
ah,
the entire
yeah,
industry, everyone does this shit. It's just like so annoying. What
yeah.
stops Microsoft from saying, you know what, this is Lucky Mouse. This is what
Well,
others
but
call
dude,
Lucky Mouse.
okay. There's several points there.
Talk to
Starting
me.
with, even their own insistence on using these fucking names, like it's obnoxious in that it's purely marketing driven, but it's to the point where it is just misleading us and being done on purpose. And then look, I was a complete asshole about this like Microsoft CrowdStrike and whatever initiative about harmonizing names, but you didn't prove me wrong. Like that shit was a month ago, and now we get this post, and
And they
this
can't
is
harmonize this.
but it's a completely frivolous use of different names because like it's not like they're brand new groups and they didn't know who they are. They're literally saying this group was active since like 2015 or whatever, and they still don't use the old name. Like it's just obnoxious. It is marketing for its own fucking sake, and it runs counter to the bullshit they wanted us to give them credit for a month ago.
Right. Costin is back or is he not back? He came back and he
I-
looks frozen
he's
again.
like-
I'm kind of back.
Let's
Rough
touch.
in Greece.
Let's touch the other Microsoft thing that we wanted to touch on, which was I mentioned it at the top, the ProPublica piece on these digital escorts being used in China. We discussed it on the pod last week, and then suddenly, like 2 hours after the podcast was published, I saw the United States Secretary of Defense Hegseth follow up with some tweets and some U.S. government guidance on this, really, really hitting hard at tech companies. The update is that after this ProPublica investigation, Microsoft says that these digital escorts, China-based engineers will no longer provide assistance to DoD cloud services. Frank Shaw, who's head of Microsoft Communications, says in response to concerns raised about U.S. supervised foreign engineers. So they're making the point that this is U.S. supervised foreign engineers. Microsoft has made changes to the support for U.S. government customers to assure that no China-based engineering teams are providing technical assistance to DoD government cloud and related services. What do you make of all of this? Just caught with their pants down and just we issue a statement, we stop doing it, everything is fine?
I mean, they're obviously caught with their pants down. They're not even denying it, right? They're just like there is. I appreciate that this VP is just coming out and saying, "Oh, we'll make sure that doesn't happen." And you're like, why the fuck was it happening in the first place? You're also kind of cagey about whether what you mean is just that. Oh, okay, we won't use Chinese ones then. You're like,
Yeah.
so they're going to be in India, right? Like, what the fuck?
Microsoft's language is always very precise. And in
yeah.
this case, Frank Shaw is saying we've made changes to our support for U.S. government customers to assure that no China-based engineering teams are providing technical Does that mean that we have digital escorts in Hungary? Does that mean they're in Vietnam? Does that mean like wherever they're cloud? Like why is this
wherever they're cheapest? I mean, look, here's the thing. And I understand that a lot of people are at war with this administration and they just want there's like this kind of never Trumper approach to whatever. I don't care about the particular, parties in politics right now. As a security industry, we really need to put on a unified front when it comes to what we ask of this government. We do have friends in this government and we do have technically literate people in this government. And there is a lot of visibility in this situation that I think is important. It's obvious that this administration is not into regulation. They want to unchain American companies. They want innovation to be sort of at the forefront of things, and they believe that regulation is a categorically negative thing, and that's perfectly okay. I understand where that appeal is coming from, and I understand the economic imperatives that go into that. That said, it's scary to think that means that companies as a whole can just expect that they will have no regulation applied on them and that they will not have their hands slapped at all. And it's genuinely scary when it comes to Microsoft, because Microsoft had barely been shaping up, barely been responding, even when expressly called out by parts of the US government for affecting operations of the US government. And when you have a vehicle like FedRAMP that is in the middle of this, that is supposed to serve as a gate for who can actually provide solutions to the US government.
What is FedRAMP? This is the second episode you mentioned it, and just for the folks who are not quite familiar with nitty-gritty of government regulation and so on, give me a high level overview of
the real so oversimplification of what FedRAMP is. It's essentially a kind of certification that a company gets that says that they are that they have passed certain hurdles in order to be able to provide solutions for the U.S. government. And it's important, right? Like it means that, only for certain types of systems, you have things like only cleared individuals are going to interact with this data. It's only being hosted in cloud instances that are segmented and appropriate for the government, right? So like you've got GovCloud and AWS and stuff like that. It's a series of requirements, and it's a pretty high bar to pass to get FedRAMP High certified. And I know that because, SentinelOne got it recently, and it was a whole struggle to get there. And we're very proud that we have FedRAMP High. That said, it's the real issue with FedRAMP these days is that Microsoft is proving that it's impossible to get FedRAMP removed or in any way curtailed. And that's where, that's why I'm saying, guys, like, as I get that the industry may have its thoughts, but like we need to put up a unified front when it comes to what we ask of this administration, in that I think regulation and any kind of stymieing of American business is anathema. It's unlikely to get traction, but we need to make a point of the fact that Microsoft is being so shameless and brazen in saying, oh, you didn't like that? Okay. And then moving on. And they've done that with the APT-29, literally reading the emails of the State Department and NSA stuff, which is insane. They've done that with other Chinese vulns in cloud stuff that they just kind of brushed off. And they're doing it with situations like this, where like we were joking, where it's like, oh, we're in the middle of the marketing cycle, right? We haven't quite approached the part with like somebody like Brad Smith or some other top level executive comes and tells all the on-prem people to secure themselves by upgrading to their cloud offering. Oh, it's coming.
None of this is comical at all. Yeah,
we know it's fucking coming. So my point here is, we as an industry and consumers have very little that they can do to force the hand of Microsoft. The only organizations that are in any position to get this, to get any traction with Microsoft on security right now are big governments. And it might not even be the EU, which is usually like, the EU is seen as like a headache because they'll come up with all these like willy-nilly things. But the US government being affected by these things needs to stand up, not as a regulatory agency, but as a customer and say, hold the fuck up. Like, we're paying you all this money and you keep serving us vulnerabilities and problems. And it's not theoretical ones. I'm not saying that like, oh, there's too many like Microsoft vulns in the Kev list. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you've got situations like this where they're the main steward of some solution and they're just blowing it off. And once, just blowing it off and smiling in the faces of people. And with the digital escorts one, it's insanely brazen. Like, you're pretending that you don't understand the purpose of these systems. Like, no. Foreigners are not supposed to be a part, but foreigners are not supposed to be a part of the servicing chain of a US government system. That's what the fuck FedRAMP was for. That's why you went through all these trainings and you get, verified and certified and all that shit. And there's even, I would even start to ask questions about where this data is, where these systems are, where are they being hosted? Because clearly the people at Microsoft don't give a fuck. And like, you have a VP confirming essentially that this was happening and then mincing words about how they're going to fix it, quote unquote, and still not even committing to like the hit to the bottom line of saying only Americans that have gone through X, Y, and Z are going to service these systems. They didn't even say only Americans who've gone through X, Y, and Z were servicing this system. ProPublica's wrong. They got confused. We do Chinese engineers for other things. We would never use that for no. They just fucking said, yeah, okay. Oh, we didn't think you wouldn't like that. It's like, what the fuck is going on,
and
man?
Worse, they knew because it was documented that in the very beginning they knew that this was problematic, but they pushed through with it anyway because no one really pushed back. I want to just mention quickly, there's a Senator Tom Cotton letter to Hegseth that basically asks for the same things you're mentioning here. He says, listen, by July 31st, I'd like you to produce a list of DoD contractors that hire Chinese personnel to provide maintenance and other services to DoD systems. A list of subcontractors that hire digital escorts from Microsoft. So this is also another little thing. If he's asking these questions, he's already read in and he's aware of what the implications are. A list of subcontractors that hire digital escorts from Microsoft or any other entity. And the training contractors or subcontractors provided to the digital escorts. And then the other thing he mentioned is any recommendation for closing existing loopholes in FedRAMP requirements, which suggests that this was not a strict requirement under what FedRAMP is. Costin, you're back. You got some quick thoughts on the ProPublica piece and where we are?
There's two things here which I was thinking about. First of all, I was wondering if you are a digital escrow, assume that you are, and someone in China does something bad and you don't see it, are you legally responsible for that? Like in the end, it's your responsibility to spot any kind of malicious activity, and if you didn't spot it, maybe you can be accused of, I don't know, facilitating the malicious activity. So I would be, I don't know, cautious. I think that people who are working in these roles, they may be probably under some kind of stress or potentially risks, if you ask me at least.
Come on, man. The company itself is not under any kind of liability or concern. Yes, you think but the individuals?
The company, no, but the people, yes. Because like in the end, when you need a scapegoat, it will be like the small guys. And potentially not all the small guys, but those who read it to ProPublica. Those will be the ones who will get punished in the end. And you know that.
This is true. And there is no doubt in any of your minds that these digital escorts are somewhere else in addition to China, right?
Well, I mean, they're not in China, I think. They're in the US, so obviously.
So let's be clear. Let's be clear on the terminology, right? The digital escorts essentially are the Americans who are reading over the logs of what foreign engineers, in this case Chinese engineers, soon to be not Chinese engineers but not American engineers, are doing. And part of the original ProPublica story that was really interesting was saying, like, just from the way they described it, they're like, well, if they run a script that's called help.bat, then we assume that it's something good, but we don't know if they're running something else, which means that the digital escorts are just looking over logs. Like, it's just metadata of what these people are doing. It's not like they're like escorting by looking over their shoulders and shit. Like, this is some weak ass compliance stuff. And it's why I'm saying, like, I think, Costin, I don't think you should even go so far as to tell the people that work there that they're under any kind of concern, because I think Microsoft is acting as if there is absolutely nothing negative that could come to them as a result of this situation. And I think if we don't prove them,
is that a fair stance to make?
Right now it is, unless the government, unless David Sachs or somebody else in this administration, the NSC, anybody in the US government comes out and says, hold the fuck up, this is not cool, then there's no reason for them to think otherwise.
It feels like it's just politicized against big tech instead of being like a very specific, let's fix this specific issue.
Well, so I think it was great. Look, I was happy to see the Hegseth video. It just insofar as, like, I was impressed that somebody was that it was being paid attention to and being just brought up. I'm so glad it was brought up and taken as part of the conversation. We didn't hear, oh, fake news, whatever. It was like, oh no, thank you for bringing this to our attention, ProPublica, Microsoft, what the fuck? And that was awesome as a first step. Now, where's the other shoe, right? Is Hegseth going to say, oh, thank you for confirming that this is being done this way. But no, fuck you. That's not enough of a solution, and we need you to account for what's been done here and why we hadn't heard about this before, right? Like, we're in the middle of this one. And
the other bigger problem is that who else can provide these services to DoD? It's like it's either Microsoft or maybe AWS, and like, there's two vendors, right?
Well, it's AWS, it's AWS, Oracle, and Google, right?
That's what I'm saying. And of the three, which one do you prefer as the same thing, as a security trendsetter, as someone as a company better equipped, at least based on what we publicly know?
I mean, Oracle and Google for sure.
Ahead of Microsoft.
Yeah. Oracle and Google for sure. Like, and I'm not saying. First of all, I'm not saying they have an equivalent solution. I don't know that that's the case, right? I also, you know, I'm nothing against AWS. They're so quiet that I have no reason to trust them about anything, right? Like, we don't hear about any kind of like issues at AWS or AWS GovCloud or any of that shit.
We don't get ProPublica pieces either. I mean,
well, I just
means no
I
one
don't
is snitching.
know. Yeah, I don't know. First of all, I don't know if anyone's snitching. I just think that Amazon has out-appled Apple by just being like just a tomb when it comes to security. And it makes me wonder if they even know, because one of the most effective solutions in this racket is to stop looking. And then you go, no attacks as far as we know, no vulnerabilities as far as we know, no issues as far as we know, no patches. There's no patches. We're not on any of these lists. You don't worry about Patch Tuesday, bro. There's nothing. And you go, is that because you know or because you don't want to look? And they go, don't worry about it. It's like, okay.
Costin, anything we missed at all on SharePoint?
Very important point here is that Hegseth never said ProPublica. He said some media organization reported. He didn't give them credit. Would that be nice to give them credit?
Yeah. They're not going to get credit.
They're not going to get credit for this study.
Hey, look,
for sure.
In this administration, that is the best kind of credit.
Hey, you got a shout out, man. You got a private shout out.
They didn't tell you that you're distorting reality or the universe or morality. We'll take it. And frankly, look, you can say whatever you want about Pete Hegseth. We've said plenty as far as like the signal chat, whatever thing, but like, as much as I don't love the format because it makes it seem silly and not important, I still love the quick response. Somebody wrote an article about something that we saw articles like that during the Biden administration, a dime a dozen, and some of them got responses, some of them didn't, but almost none of them got clear admonishments. You didn't get like a...
There's a little piece here. There was some Laura Loomer coverage of this on the Twitter sphere, right alongside the ProPublica piece. And there was some other components to it that triggered the fast response, because that's why I said it seems to have been politicized as, oh my God, big tech is dangerous. Right? Yeah. Because that's how that was positioned. So, I mean, we got what we got.
Laura Loomer is the most powerful creature in
100%.
In the security
because she's
space.
Been tweeting and tagging this digital escort thing. Actually wrote a big piece on it. It triggered this kind of quick government response because guys are obviously paying attention to what happens there.
I tell you, when I saw Hegseth talking, I thought it's AI generated, because I thought it's impossible the government reacts so quickly to a story. Yeah. It's like some kind of AI generated avatar.
Dude's got his video crew with him, man. First we saw the drones, and now we see this. Yeah.
Look, all I'm saying here is, it was an interesting first step. Where's the follow-up? And I look, the same way that we're giving credit to Hegseth for responding for whatever reason, but for responding, okay, now you got to make it real. You have to make it real, because you showed that it got the attention of the government. And if you don't follow through,
what does making it real mean? What are you looking for? What are you hoping to see?
I think Microsoft's FedRAMP certification needs to get pulled, and that needs to suggest some kind of...
though.
See what you're saying, right? For as long as Microsoft gets to believe the same thing you just said is true, then they're not going to do a goddamn
That's the
thing.
reality, though.
But look, the federal people think like, oh, you pull FedRAMP, but that means that like what, you're going to shut down all these cloud instances? Like it's impossible. The government. No, the point is you can pull their FedRAMP cert and send it back to review and come up with whatever process you want, and then say, okay, you've got contracts that last for the next however many years, but you cannot get any upsells, cannot get any renewals, will get no, like any bid and tender that Microsoft is currently on is now under review and reopened for other companies. Like make it a fucking free-for-all for Microsoft's existing government business. Give Oracle, Amazon, and Google an incentive to step up and be like, oh fuck, like $300 million or however many millions of dollars the US government pays Microsoft every year is up for grabs. That's how you're going to drive this thing. And it's very doable, and it could actually produce better results across the board. Yeah. We need competition here.
Costin, anything else? Last thoughts before we move on? We're now into Microsoft.
It feels that Juan has some friends who are digital escorts. Am I mistaken here?
No, man.
I smell something. You have friends who are digital escorts.
I'm just amazed that he's a FedRAMP expert.
Digital escort work is work too. Okay,
I have no issue with that.
You need to have some respect for these digital escorts. I think
absolutely
digital escorts don't get the kind of respect they should.
If I wasn't clear, what I was saying is that I worry for these kind people that they will get in trouble over something that shouldn't be their fault in the first place. Right. And there are things that, things that you want, things that Microsoft want, things that the government want, and then there are things that will happen. And I fear that what will actually happen in this story will be that Microsoft will come up with an AI that wings the digital escort. It will be like a wingman for the digital escort wing AI that will look at the logs as well and tell the digital escort, hey, this looks shady that the Pakistani guy with the Chinese name is doing now, but he's safe because he's in Pakistan. It's kind of fishy, because it's like malicious in some cases. So I think that
they're
that's
not even
what's
using recall.
Happen.
If you pay attention to this, those systems are not even using recall. If they were using recall, the AI could at least be checking what they're doing. They're not even fucking trying. You're telling me digital escorts, tell me they have a screen recording of what happens on the system, and they have the most invasive Windows setup. I mean, we know they're good at this. Microsoft could create the most invasive fucking setup of Windows for this shit, and they're just look. The point here is not, again, this is not a technological problem. This is not a technological problem at all. This is not a thing that doesn't have a possible solution. This is Microsoft trying to cut costs on a government program that I'm sure is being overpaid for.
Overpriced through the roof.
15, 20x. And they still couldn't be bothered to hire a dozen Americans to do this because they can
issue a Frank Shaw statement and get away with it.
But come on, man, it's a level of bracenness that is just inexcusable. Why can't you accept that a certain service, that a certain government tender is just going to cost you this much money to run? You're making 20 times how much you would charge somebody else for this service. The whole point is that you're factoring in the cost of getting local talent, of keeping the data in here, of protecting it more, and dealing with regulatory bullshit. But don't take the thing and then also shortchange them. Someone has to slap their hand. If they don't, then it's a fucking free-for-all, and I'm going into rug pulls tomorrow. Let's just go start some cryptocurrencies and shit. We're done here.
Let me ask the closing question. On a scale of 1 to 5, Costin, before you go, on a scale of 1 to 5, what are the chances the Chinese already exploited this to see something that they shouldn't have seen? You think they were already aware of this gap?
I'm optimistic here, and I say there's a very small chance that this already got exploited. Because why? Because if it was exploited, the story would be Chinese hackers took advantage of Microsoft digital escort system to breach Department of Defense cloud infrastructure. That would be the story.
Possible we don't know that yet?
I think it would be
Unlikely.
public. I think that you can't keep it secret for that long. And if one of these digital escorts, let's say, missed something and they signed on malicious activity or whatever, I think it would be public. So in my opinion, the chance is small. And
I wish
what
it
I
was
think
true.
here, let me tell you
Wait,
something.
let Juan
No,
counter.
no. Can I finish first? Let
go
me finish my point.
He hasn't spoken. Let him speak.
I see this problem as like an old radio with many buttons, like dials. You can turn left and right, okay? And there's one button or like a dial that you can turn, which is, let's say, total cost of this operation, like hiring people in which countries. And there's like many different dials. And the reality of this story is that you can't turn any of those dials. The only dial that you will be able to change, or the setting that will be able to change, will be the AI wingman that will be put on top of this construction in order to make it compliant. That's it. Game over. The others, you cannot touch them. You cannot touch like how many people you have, or the cost, or the price, or the all the investments and everything. That's untouchable in my humble, pessimistic opinion. The only one that will change, the AI wingman.
Juanito, you're saying that he's being naive.
No, I'm not saying he's being naive. I think he is expecting this shit to make sense. And I actually have witnessed in the past 2 years, less than 2 years, I have witnessed Microsoft hiding vulnerabilities that were affecting the US government and other people, and I'm not sure they ever got called to task. And the only way those vulnerabilities were discovered were through means that just so happened to be opportunistically available somewhere in the halfway mark between the attacker and Microsoft. And they didn't say shit. They didn't tell anybody anything. They didn't do anything with that. And it affected Gov and other folks. This has been the issue with cloud and cloud regency that I've been discussing for like a year, at least on this podcast. If you remember, like the first 6 months of the podcast, I wouldn't stop raging on the cloud providers. And it was because of situations like this that we kept running into when we were like, look, we know of a vuln. We know that it's being actively exploited. We know it's affecting these people. Let's go talk to them. They told us to pound sand. They're not going to fix it. What do we do now? Right? Do you go to the press? Do you that would put some pressure, but not enough. Do you go to the government? Are they actually, what part of the government is going to do anything about it? And the scary part was that this whole system of accountability depended on bystanders who happened to be lucky in having the telemetry, qualified in having the ability to verify what it was, suicidal in being willing to put their own careers at stake to go hold a mega company to account. And even then we couldn't get change, but it was also the only way we found out about it. And that's the really scary part when it comes to governments and sensitive organizations being dependent on the cloud, the new cloud rentiers or whatever, cloud landlords, I should say, for any of their sensitive infrastructure. You actually have no rights. There is no bill of rights or whatever the fuck it is as a cloud customer. And it shows. They are showing you that they can just tell you to go. They can tell the US government, they can tell the Department of Defense to go fuck itself. What is any other customer going to do? What does a medium-sized customer expect?
And this is why I love the CSRB. And I hope, I saw, by the way, Sean Plankey's nomination is moving through the Senate. They actually had a hearing yesterday, so we might have a new official head of CISA soon. And I hope, one of my asks, if anybody listens to me, nobody should, but if anybody listens to me, is like, restart the CSRB. Even if we don't get the power to make things, to change things. At least we get all this stuff documented.
They're gonna put Laura
for
Loomer
use.
on that bitch, and then
Yeah. I gotta
it's
ping
gonna
Laura
turn
Loomer
terrifying.
to ask
It's
for the
gonna be-
CSRB. I guarantee you we get it.
It's
Let
gonna
me
be
switch
like
gears
the
quickly.
McCarthy of technology.
Isn't she busy with
Costin,
the Epstein list nowadays?
Probably.
There's no list.
Let me switch gears.
There's no
Last
list.
week, you guys skewered Google Big Sleep AI, and our
So-
friend, chief at Mandy and John Holtquist actually tweeted at you, Juanito. Hilarious feedback on this from the Three Body Problem podcast. This was a big win from Big Sleep and Intel, and as much as we'd love to offer the full details, sources, and methods, concerns precluded. We just couldn't sit on it. Trust me, Juanito. This is a whole new era. So you got the trust me, bro, from John Holtquist on Big Sleep being a real significant blah blah blah. Do we go with the trust me, or do we still demand?
Let's treat this one more personally and less rapidly, right? Like I do trust John Holtquist. I like John Holtquist. He's my friend, and I do trust him. And frankly, and I said it during the original discussion, I trust Mandiant. I've never looked at a Mandiant post and said, well, this is bullshit, right? Like
Project Zero as well.
Saying.
Project Zero is very involved here, and they have the reputation and
more so. Project Zero has like a sterling credibility when it comes to these things. Speaking on a more personal level, I frown at the execution. I think that now I'm speaking as a peer and somebody who's also involved in marketing for a partner organization. We have, SentinelOne and Google Threat Intel are like massive partners. There was a way to position this that could have actually gotten everybody excited. And I'm sure that there's Intel equities involved. I also know how oversensitive Google can be about those Intel equities, but I think Holtquist's excitement mirrors Dave Itel's excitement, mirrors my excitement, mirrors Sean Heelan's excitement about what AI can do. And it's not like we doubt that it can do it. I'm sure that there's a sources aspect of this that makes sense.
What could be a sources and method access to this?
Oh, this gets really, really simple, dude. Like if they, let's say that the attackers were leveraging some Google coding platform, some Google AI platform
Gemini,
to answer questions. They were testing out, something in a particular kind of cloud environment that there's visibility into. Somebody they know reached out and
Why
said,
the fuck wasn't this in the blog post?
But that's my point. Exactly. They are like, there's a version of sources and methods that I just think they were overzealous with it, and there was a way to be clever that would have gotten the point across without really
driving the skepticism.
Right, yeah, right. The way it was done, it was too trust me, bro. You just got to give me a little bit more so that moreover, the issue here is you're trying to tell us that something new has happened, which means that we need to reassess our assumptions about what's possible and likely in our space.
Correct.
You can't you need to give us a little more insofar as like, what does the scaffolding of this thing look like? Because what you could be telling us, like, dude, sources and methods, Ryan, you want me to tell you sources and methods? It could be somebody that fucking works at this APT and they're trying to get the fuck out of there and they want a job at Mandiant and they're like, yo, to prove my bona fides, here's like, they're trying to go build a vuln in that direction. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm saying shit
but there's
like
a variety
happens.
of things, yeah.
The point here, though, is I think you're trying to say a more complex thing than AI validates or solves or fixes or fixes vulnerabilities. You're trying to say AI is at a point where it can preempt the use of exploit, like the weaponization of vulnerabilities into exploits. And that is a big point. It's not a small thing. And if you're telling the truth, which I assume you are, we want to know, you got to give us a little more. In what way is it doing? We just need to know the role of AI on this. And I suspect, I have a feeling, a gut intuition that I'm exploring right now, that the future of cybersecurity, if we abandon the failed husk of the cybersecurity project of the last 10 years, the future iteration is one that has to embrace AI for order of magnitude gains in impact. So I'm all
This is your new
for this.
keynote. This sounds very much like you preempted it on the previous podcast about the failure of the cybersecurity construct.
That was my keynote last year, and I'm debating whether I even give a keynote or not this year. Like I don't know, but to me, there is cybersecurity is the last true interdisciplinary industry that brings folks that are big thinkers like Halvar into the space, like Sean Heelan, like Dan Geer, folks that are thinking in big. It's not just big picture, but we're saying, look, the things we understand from physics, the things we understand from information theory, the things we understand from the cutting edge of mathematics, so the cutting edge of whatever, should inform how we think about cybersecurity in systems thinking, in big, broad concepts. And in that sense, I think personally that cybersecurity needs to reinvent itself in the light of a new form of cybernetics. We need to step back to cybernetics and say, what does it look like to have a stochastic version of feedback loops that build upon themselves, in compounding advantages that sort of how do you fix a code base in a way that accounts for the steady rate of error introduction, essentially code entropy, that Dave Eitel figured out with Aardvark, right? Like there's a lot of things here that we need to go back to the drawing board and look at this on really big picture terms and reinvent cybersecurity away from the products and the industry that was created over the past 10, 15 years, because that industry will not change. It will not improve. It will not allow itself to move beyond the product categories it has gotten comfortable with, which is why you see every company just chasing after each other to have parity on offerings, right? Like the recorded future playbook of yes, whatever it is you want, yes, we do it. Like it's like the coverage is a mile long and like an inch deep. I can't even blame them that much, because I see most companies doing the same thing. When somebody comes to ask about data loss protection, you go, oh, fuck, we're a cloud security company, but people want DLP. How do we just pretend we also have DLP so that we can win this tender? And that means that the entire product space is chasing behind itself in a fucking loop. And there is zero innovation happening. There's zero room for innovation to happen. The VCs are not helping this shit. Private equity is sure as shit not helping this at all. So
yeah, but Juanito, at the same time, we're going on this move fast, break things. The new executive order on AI just dropped that basically said removed all guardrails. It actually blocked the states from even doing any sort of regulations. Costin talked about it last week, where we're going to end up 2 years down the line and accounts are being agentic AI is doing some magic crazy shit. Yeah. And you're promoting this. You're promoting this kind of like it's hard charging ahead.
I'm saying that I'm accepting the reality that we're in, which is the big companies don't give a fuck. The industry is not innovating. And you now have all this incentive for these insecure systems to sprout like mushrooms. And we need to get away from this almost like this is going to sound so fucking like Republican-y.
Make it sound.
This lefty idea that the way to secure things is to slap the hands of people that are doing insecure things. We need to get the fuck away from that.
You're wrong.
No. I'm not saying we don't do it, but it cannot be the primary function of people attempting to do big picture cybersecurity to go, how do I force people to comply with a better way of doing things? I think we've tried it, and we still need to keep telling people when they're doing the wrong thing and tell them what the better thing is. But that cannot be the driving force of cybersecurity, because if anything, what we've seen is that it just doesn't work. It doesn't scale. It doesn't live long. Look at MSRC. One of our own created a better culture there and pushed, along with a bunch of other people, they pushed super fucking hard and they got improvement. They got to a better state. What happened? The minute they turned their backs, the minute they moved on in their careers and went to do other things, it went back to the same state of shittiness that it was in before, which means that it's not a solve, it's a patch. And we need to also run fast and break things in the interest of looking for new kinds of cybersecurity dynamics. Otherwise, we'll have job security, but we're about to get fucking buried.
The knock Costin on this was the article. The article didn't have anything. There was just a line there, and it was pushing you to some DEF CON speeches and black hat talks in Las Vegas. But the reality is, as John Hultquist says, is working from artifacts gathered by Google Threat Intelligence, Big Sleep was used to identify a vulnerability before actors could ramp up exploitation. He says it doesn't get better than this in Intel. Like, he is, I mean, we trust
bullish.
John. John is obviously not going to be lying about this.
John is bullish.
Is there a way to be bullish and to be excited about this? Withhold methods and whatever stops you from going fully public, and at least documenting something that gets the rest of us excited beyond trust me, bro.
I think it absolutely is a possibility, and my hope is that we get a Project Zero blog post follow-up that talks about the vuln, obviously, but also
Let's demand it.
Well, what I want to see, I don't give a shit where it came
Hultquist
from.
is listening.
John Hultquist, Russia, if you're listening. No, this is just me saying, like, I believe Mandiant and Google in general has done something really special here. I don't need to know where it came from. You can take the precog part of this out of it completely. I want to know more about Big Sleep's performance and success parameters. And that's what matters to me. What matters to me is what role is the AI playing, and what has Google learned so far about how LLMs materially improve the conditions. Under what parameters do LLMs work well, right? Like, there's only 2 places on Earth, maybe 3, that are doing this at scale. And what they learn is gonna mean it matters a lot. We need some reports, essentially, from the people that are doing this work, letting us know what we can expect from the future.
Costin?
I thought Juan said a lot of interesting things, and I was also thinking that this blog can definitely be written in a better manner. I mean, I would probably be able to write in such a way that makes more people happy, if you want, by providing some details that make people happy and don't tip the attackers. But in this story, I would settle for a private talk from John at one of these good conferences like
give me a key.
LabsCon or PivotCon or SOS, State of Statecraft. Sorry about that.
Statecraft.
I would settle for a speech at any of these events, which talks a bit more in a safe environment. But what Juan
keynote
said,
Offensive AI Con or something.
Yeah, what you said, Juan, also I thought it was important about the scaffolding, and we are living in times and at the moment where you can still push back on stories like this, and it's important to have that pushback, and it's important to kind of define the scaffolding in such a way that creates a better, more secure future where people are, I don't know, more happy. And speaking of scaffolding, it was just a few days ago, fantastic movie, highly recommended. Return to the 36th Chamber of Shaolin with Gordon Liu.
Oh my God.
I knew it was
all
a Kung
about
Fu movie
scaffolding.
coming.
It's all about scaffolding. Go watch it.
What's
it's
the name
on
of
YouTube.
it? Return of what?
Return to the 36th Chamber of Shaolin with Gordon Liu. fantastic
Isn't
movie.
that a Wu-Tang album?
I was just gonna say it sounds like
because
a Wu-Tang
they
song.
were all about these old Shaw Brothers.
36 Chambers
Kung
is
Fu.
Wu-Tang.
Yeah,
Mick
absolutely.
Bacchio is gonna, smack me for not knowing this
Go
off
watch
the cuff.
the movie.
But
It's a masterpiece, and Gordon Liu was absolutely fantastic in that movie. And it's all about scaffolding and what that teaches you about art.
Ah, nice. I'll go look at this tonight. All
Free
right,
on
guys.
YouTube.
All right,
Well,
guys. The other. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was hoping that. Are you gonna stay on AI or are you going somewhere else? Okay, take us.
That
We're
is
an
Take
hour
us
and a
on
half.
fantastic
We're an
AI
hour and a
story.
half in.
Can you mention
listen. I
that
want us
AI
to do.
story?
Come on, yeah, dude.
Which AI story you guys are talking about?
Come on. You know what AI story we're talking about? Like
You say, Juan.
the part where the vibe coding goes wrong.
Ah, yes. But we don't have it on this list. Am I wrong? Why
don't
don't
have
we
it.
have
We
it
have
on
it
this
on the
list?
list. We have
We
it
have
on the
it?
list.
We have it.
Yeah, fuck you guys. You guys did this to me last
Introduce
episode.
it. Introduce it.
And like, so there's a hilarious story. It's been making the rounds off of a Twitter thread from the poor gentleman that this has happened to, and then I think PC Gamer wrote an actual story about it. But essentially, this gentleman Jason Lemkin, who is an enterprise and software as a service venture capitalist. He's been documenting day by day his foray into vibe coding and essentially trying to use these AI technologies to work on his business and do so in a very like kind of open manner. I suspect that there's some grand message about how much you can do as an entrepreneur with the vibe coding space. Where it gets hilarious is, I believe, day 8, when Jason awakens to find out that Claude had essentially wiped out their production database. And what ensues is a tragic but hilarious exchange. It's not Claude, sorry. I think this is a Replit thing, right?
Replit.
Yeah. So he's using Replit, which is a great app. It's a great website. It's actually one of my go-tos for like this kind of vibe coding stuff. But essentially, you go into Replit and you can just say, "Hey, build me this website and do X, Y, and Z, and set up a database in this flavor and set up the front end and whatever." And then the agents will kind of set all that up extremely quickly. So it's a fantastic way of getting 0 to 60 on a new project very, very quickly. The interesting thing is seeing Jason Lemkin trying to use it in seems like more of a maintenance mode for an existing solution that involves production databases. And to be fair to Jason, he had put in instructions that said, don't change anything with the database. You're in a code freeze. You can't do X, Y, and Z. And it seems that the Replit agent went ahead and ignored those. And hilariously, in very LLM fashion, he actually goes through and has the conversation with the LLM, like doing the forensic analysis of what the LLM did. And the LLM's like, yeah, I ignored your instructions. I ignored your code freeze. I did this. I destroyed months of work in this and that way. I did this irrecoverable thing. So it's keeping a grand accounting of how it's fucked everything up, which I think, credit where credit is due.
This is not that much of a black box.
No.
Costin, you talked about this last week when we talked about agentic AI and the ramifications for it doing this crazy shit. How do you respond to this? The Replit guy, the CEO of Replit, put together a response that basically said the team worked over the weekend and now put various guardrails and other useful changes to rein in this kind of unacceptable behavior. This was just like one episode. Are we likely to see tons of these episodes popping up in the future?
Well, like I said the last time, I had this premonition, and as I said the last time, I do not worry about our job, because as long as people write code with AI in such a style, we'll always have a job. I mean, it is deemed that AIs of the future, as they become more and more sophisticated, they will start having all sorts of issues. I don't know, like depression, like demotivation. And there'll be people that'll be forced, to be like a psychologist for AIs or like a horse whisperer for AIs, AI whisperer, if you want.
That's what Anthropic's been doing this whole time.
It's inevitable, if you want. And to give you another horror story, which happened to me this weekend, I have some application which relies on a password which is actually stored in the configuration file of a daemon. And I didn't remember exactly how you do that. It's kind of standard on Linux. And I asked one of the AIs, like, help me remember where do you typically store the password for the Tor daemon that you use to control it. And I gave the AI the line of code where that password came as a parameter from my code. And it was fantastic to see the LLM answer something along the lines, oh, in your function, and then it gives the full function that handles that part of the logic. I gave it only one line, but it lists the full function, which it wrote in the past, like months ago. And I was like, holy shit, how do you know? How do you understand like the whole code of that function? It means that you remember that you wrote this code like months ago.
You weren't in the same like thread, in the same conversation?
No, it's in a different conversation, and history is off. So I was like, holy shit, somehow you understand that you wrote that function like months ago, and now you have like the full understanding of how that works and where the password is actually stored, which the realization of these things is scary. Because then you understand every time you write some piece of code, previous and past experiences will influence the reply. So if in the past you were like, hey, help me backdoor, help me put a remote management functionality in this function where the password comes, and now
help me edit
will it come with that functionality, with the remote access functionality from like 3 months ago? I don't know, probably. And this will induce totally unexpected, impossible to predict results, backdoors, remote access functionalities in code. So it'll be fun.
So I'm not looking to kind of victim blame on this one at all, right? This shows that there's room for a lot of guardrails and improvement on the part of things like Replit. At the same time, on the
tooling side, right?
Well,
on the tooling side, you put the onus on them to make sure that these guardrails are in place.
In part, like I said, I don't want to victim blame, but I want to go read through the full days of the thread because I'm confused at what Replit functionality is being used here to be in a kind of constant state of maintenance. Like that's something that you see from something like ChatGPT's codex. Don't get confused. There's two codexes. ChatGPT, embracing its historical inability to name anything, released two different products named Codex within the span of a month. They're totally fucking different. There's Codex CLI, and then there's like the Codex agent thing that manages, projects continually. I'm confused by what functionality this gentleman's using in Replit, because to me, Replit is a great solution for kind of, like I said, that first mile. The what is it? Crawl, walk, run. This is the crawl phase being done very, very well. And the whole point is that it will deploy to Supabase for you and it will set all this shit up. But I have never looked at Replit as a solution that I would plug an existing code base into or an existing production database into and then ask it to manage and change things long term. So I'm a little confused about how it's being used. I also wonder to what extent the reason this happened is context rot, in the sense of, when you use LLMs a great deal, you start to develop certain intuitions for when it stops working well. And one of those is something that folks are calling context rot, but essentially because we're getting these giant context windows and these hidden strategies about how context is being managed, a lot of people are doing a lot in a single thread, in a single conversation. And of course you want to, right? For less critical things, like Sam Altman says, like Zoomers are very interesting in the way that they use it. You'll see that they keep one long conversation that they just keep talking about different things in, and that way the agent the LLM has access to so much information about different aspects of their lives that it starts to answer very competently because it has access to all of it. However, you really don't want to do that kind of shit when you're trying to get consistent, verifiable results, because the more that goes into that context window and the more that is being kind of either, there's several strategies that are not being shown, but like you might get the context compacting as it gets too big. You might get the context, only the beginning and the end being kept, but the middle bit kind of missing. Or you might get a rolling window where you lose the beginning, which might be the worst strategy because it means you lose the prompt, like the original, hey, you are this, don't do that, blah, blah. So that's the mechanism that I'm wondering if it's at play here, where like the guy was just doing so much work with this agent that it was just the part where it even knew to check whether it was allowed to be in a code freeze or whatever had already kind of rotted away. The other side of this that is on Replit is, I mean, if you have connectors to databases, if you are enabling the ability to kind of touch these systems, then you probably should, like, I think we need to get to a digital twin strategy of coding, essentially. Like anything these things touch on their own should be happening in a mock or a split or a forked version of
sandbox environment or something.
Version control, it has to be. Please,
Small.
please. I've been talking forever. Please.
You are the digital escort, and the AI is a Chinese guy.
He's right.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true.
I got two small thoughts. One is, even with history turned off, history is not really turned off. That's just a theory I have in my mind.
Correct.
Because I sometimes go in there and I say, ignore all previous instructions, la la la, do this. And I know it's pulling from previous instructions, or I know it's pulling from previous things. So I don't know. I have just a theory just based on my experience that Costin mentioned history being turned off. It doesn't quite work that way.
Depends entirely on what system we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not a power user like you. I'm just talking about for the rest of us. For the rest of us, it just feels very much that it's a little more invasive and a little more screenshotty than I would like it to be. It's
a feature.
It's a feature. The second thought I have, and it's more of a question for you guys, as you more get into vibe coding, you start to do all of this stuff. Are you worried that you're getting just intellectually lazy and you're passing all of this to them? I find it happening to me a lot with writing an article or writing a feature story and so on. Obviously, I'm relying on ChatGPT, OpenAI to help parse certain things. I'm doing the final touches with it, and then I feel like it didn't feel like I did work. It felt like I was getting lazy and I was passing this thing on. Juan, do you feel that at all? And is that something we should worry about? Or the future is we don't really need to know any of this shit. We just pass it off.
Ask Costin first. I've been rambling about AI this whole time.
Well, I've been doing a lot of vibe coding recently, since at least the beginning of the year. In what I noticed is that I learn a lot. So I would most likely not write the code that the AI is writing in that manner. I would write it like old school. I would use like different function, different methods. The AI is writing the code in a completely different manner than me. And first of all, I'm learning a lot. I don't feel that I'm becoming more lazy. On the contrary, I feel that I learn things. And the other thing is, there's quite a, let's say, a big difference between, let's say, putting like a very complex prompt and then getting something back and just using, and then going back and forth on the same, like, hey, let's modify this function, add this new. So I noticed that the more you mess with the product, the more you mess with the code, the higher the chances that error make it into the final result. Sometimes code randomly magically disappears, like some previous functionality is no longer there, like somehow magically disappear. I've seen cases when you specifically like say, let's add this new functionality. So when let's say a value of X comes this way, then let's process it in a different way, and it doesn't get processed like in that particular way. It's like, oh, it ends messed up. So sometimes I have to start from scratch. I get the previous best version and I start from scratch, which is why it's important, in my opinion, to keep revisions, keep many revisions of the code that you keep changing, so that you can go back to one of those previous ones. So you do learn some new things, but at the same time, if you ask me, like, write this thingy from scratch, I would never write it in that fashion. Like, sometimes this is good.
Is it more efficient? Do you find it's more efficient? Do you find like you're learning to code better? The things that you're learning makes it.
In a way, I'm not learning to code better, but I feel ashamed that if I were to write that piece of code, I would write it in a more kind of sleazy way, not as neat and straightforward, definitely. And probably I would write it in like a lot more lines of code. And sometimes it's incredible that one of these things, it ends up into like, I don't know, 25 lines of Python, because there are like some deep functionalities in Python and external libraries that I didn't know about. And the code takes advantage of all these external libraries while I would manually implement that functionality. So you learn a lot, but I feel that even the best models nowadays, as you keep discussing the code and improving it, these tiny errors start to be added. And if it rewrites the entire code from scratch, like from the beginning to the end, then the probability of the errors to accumulate increases with every iteration.
Magnifies,
and this is probably what we've seen here.
It's I think honestly that this is where we're getting mistakes on the part of the companies that are implementing these solutions in trying to do more with the things that are kind of working right now than we probably should be doing. The way that I see it, and it's like the same frustration that I have with ideas about like mechanistic interpretability for models, is if the AI people think that we're reconstructing the brain and the functions of how the human brain works, the human brain is this unbelievable, fascinating agglomeration of these little circuits that conduct electricity. And it kind of keeps reinventing itself, less and less so as we get older, right? Neuroplasticity drops. But essentially what you've got is these like big circuits that form as things that get used a lot. And that's like language learning and mobility things. And like, it's basically like you have these localities of the brain that like become denser the more they're being used, the more they're being accessed. And they create these functions that this functionality and whatnot in these like specific circuits. There's similar discussions about how this is happening in models. And there's like an order of magnitude difference of how much these big models are essentially, even the amount of parameters, right, compared to the brain is at least like at least a 10x difference, right? Like we're like 3 billion parameters, and like there's a suspicion that the brain operates at something like 30 billion equivalent. I don't know. I don't even know what we're counting at this point. My view here is we had a more honest sense of what the limitations of these tools were when we had these small context windows. When ChatGPT first started and we were seeing that, like, look, this thing is awesome for 8,000 tokens. It's awesome for 16,000 tokens, maybe. Now they've created all of this bullshit around making the context window, a single context window, 1 million tokens long, but it's not a true capability. It's a lot of, duct tape and chewing gum and like MacGyvering that's making that happen. And what it's obfuscating is the fact that these tools still only work very, very well in smaller context windows. And what we should be expecting is functionality to come from an aggregation of these circuits getting used in these small pockets to amount to a larger task. Instead of coming in and saying, I have a million token window available, I'm going to have it rewrite my entire code in one go, you still essentially need to take your code base, chunk it up into problems and tasks and relevant context and go, do this for this bit, do this for this bit, do this for this bit, do it 10 times, do it 100 times. Now let's go pick which version actually works well for this, for this, for this, for this. Now reevaluate. Like a lot of this is iterative development. It's a stochastic system, where everybody's trying to one-shot everything they do and it's not working out, and everybody's trying to overload these context windows because they're being encouraged to by these developers because it's cheaper for them that way, and they're getting worse results. And when you look at something like what Replit is doing, I think you see the true crime, the true failure in setting up these systems is that they're not underlied by revision control. Like the Codex OpenAI tool is fine because all of your code is stored in GitHub. So it can change, it can do whatever it wants, but at no point is Codex going to just be able to get rid of everything because it's just altering something in GitHub. And that means that everything is branches and forks and merges and whatever, and you can go backwards. All these tools like Claude Code that have not been trained or insisted on using Git or some other revision control for everything they change are ticking time bombs. They're all a disaster. Because what do? I've lost all kinds of shit.
Vibe coding, man.
You did a great job halfway through, and now we're like a mile deep. We can't get back to the thing that worked that was somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah, but the size of context windows is what drives this industry forward. I mean, that's what the big platforms are saying. We are going to make context windows bigger and bigger and bigger, and it makes it a lot more efficient. And like, that's the pitch, isn't that the pitch?
Technology doesn't work that way. What has to be happening here is something that, like, we've been discussing in the AI Sommelier Society with Gimpy in particular. Is a problem called that we call problem sharding. When you think about a human approach to problem solving, you split in order to effectively do something, you split the problem into more manageable chunks. Whether you think about it or not, like intuitively, you split the problem into more manageable steps, and then you address those, and then you go back bird's eye view, and you go, am I approaching the problem the right way? And then you go back into these smaller things. And I think the problem, the ability to figure out efficient problem sharding is going to be akin to like the Entscheidungsproblem or the halting problem for stochastic systems, for variable systems, which is like, how do we get these machines that are variable in their output to efficiently approach a problem, break it up into a more efficient way of solving that task? Because these systems, by definition, are going to have to be distributed, and they're going to have to be iterative. Getting like the big context window thing is something that we're getting sold on right now because it's the easier way for these companies to try to productize as quickly as possible. But what actually needs to happen is they need to figure out what it means to effectively break up the problem and to effectively address the problem in pieces and then put those pieces back together. And it's why we're now seeing all of a sudden, Costin said it last time, it's like agentic is the way to go. Sure. What are agentic models doing? They have tools, and they have the ability to recursively spawn other processes underneath. So what are they doing? They're sharding the problem into pieces, assessing what thing solves what part of the problem, and then taking the results and sharding them back together. That's not a context thing. That's an iterative, distributed thing.
You're learning like Costin is, or are you getting lazier?
Both. What I find myself doing is I find that I'm a lot more judicious about my attention management. The more that it becomes clear that there's drivel on the screen, that there's something that just, was generated by some bullshit process, my brain does not default to consuming it. It does not default to reading it. Just because text has appeared does not mean that I am going to give it time. So it's made me a lot more judicious about where I put my attention. I am learning when I let myself engage. What I find myself doing is I'm much more obsessed with like knowledge management and how to store things away and connect things in a way that's meaningful and accessible. And then my writing process, which is not in a good place right now. I've been very writer's blocked, and I just don't have the time. But it's become a lot more about editing and incremental writing, like bits. Break up into a chunk, get something very dense, like information dense, and then figure out how to position it, and then do the same over and over and over.
And you
again.
recommend that for folks even writing long reports as well? Do it in smaller chunks rather than have this big context window, create a bigger thing. You're more likely to get a hallucination. You're more likely to get a problem, right?
Your work is not being done in any of these AI solutions. You're sourcing information, you're sourcing copy edit, you're sourcing text, you're sourcing improvements, you're sourcing tooling. The true work when it comes to writing is going to be done in Obsidian and Google Docs and wherever. And there it's about your brain taking bits and pieces that are important, putting them near each other, and then figuring out how to synthesize and edit into it. And it just reminds me of like, there was a book that was really helpful to me when I was in college and undergrad called Writing for Social Scientists. And the whole point of it was, to get away from ritualizing writing and then to become comfortable with the fact that like writing is iterative and you shouldn't be trying to one-shot your writing. You should get comfortable with the fact that you just want text, and then you are going to come back and edit it, and you're going to come back and edit it, and you're going to come back and edit it. That's just a part of the writing process. So when you look at it that way, the AIs are great at giving me copy. They're great at refining how I might want to say something or what information I might want to include. And then I am the evaluator and the judicious part of this that says, this is what should make it in there and isn't. These things are related. This thing is correct or incorrect.
And all of us with our ADHD adult brain will be doing it differently. We'll all figure out our own path and way to do it. Let's close the show. We're almost at 2 hours. Costin, you get to lead off our shout-outs this week. Close the show with some shout-outs.
Shout-outs to my good friend Mr. Dan, who I sent him some photos of Greek food, and the first thing he asked, like, are you going to have some souvlaki? Are you going to have some shawarma, like, Greek shawarma if you want? Gyros, souvlaki, and of course, we're going to have everything, my friend. And we're missing you, and we'll send you photos of everything.
Shout out to Mr. Dan. Good man.
Dan Demeter, man, developer of Clara and everything.
Correct.
It's our boy.
We'll get to Clara in a minute. In a future episode, we've got a lot of requests for people for Costin to talk about his lab and his setup and how he goes hunting and so on. We'll do an entire episode on that. I promised one of our listeners we'll do an entire episode on that.
Somebody reminded me, we're almost a year from a very interesting APT drop. We should think about.
All right, let's talk about it offline. There's a good little teaser. Close the show with some shout-outs. You got any?
I don't have too many, but just going back on what we've been discussing, shout out to Katie Masuris for her work back in the day. I do think it's important to say there was a better time for MSRC, and we hope that they return to it and that they find that it's worth investing just a little more into having a better security culture. Shout out, actually, Ryan, I don't think your keynote gets enough traction on that front. I do think people should go check out that Echo Party keynote just to get a sense of kind of where things are going. Shout out to all of our digital escort workers out there. Digital escort work is work too. Respect for these people. And shout out to Vivans for sorting some of the shit show out in all of this vibe coding.
Appreciate it. The LabsCon speaker notification started to go out yesterday to the folks who were accepted. The agenda looks fire. I'm hoping that we get to announce the full agenda pretty soon. Catch Juanito and I at at Black Hat in Las Vegas. Look for us. You know how to find us. And with that, we'll close the show. Costin, enjoy the rest of your souvlaki-inspired Greek vacation.
Yes, and
pictures.
last but not least, I need to say this. I don't think the brain is entirely chemical and electric. I think there's more going on, probably quantum effects as well. I think it's important to mention
Blockchain effects.
which, because it doesn't explain other things like intuition or like remote viewing. And another thing that I was thinking about, I was looking into language, by the way, earlier today, like who came up, who were the first, like the Greek or the Romans who came up with the alphabet? And it turns out it were the Greek. The Greek got it from the Phoenicians, the Romans got it from the Greek, and so on.
He's
But
falling
then
for Greek propaganda.
Yeah, I
guys.
see,
He just
right?
arrived
No,
one day.
2 minutes there. It's
you
just
come to the
already in it.
conclusion that in 2000 years, this didn't change at all. Is it like maybe time for, who says that this is the best, most efficient way for our chemical quantum brains to process information, like this kind of a language? Is there like a more effective language? And this reminds me of one thing, which was when I was in India, my friends there said that you want to improve your brain, get better, learn Sanskrit. People who learn Sanskrit, there's like new connections forming in their brain, and you become like faster, your thinking is superior, just as I think Oppenheimer was also studying and learning Sanskrit. So
This
just
is why
go
people
ahead, learn
smoke weed,
Sanskrit. Correct. That's why you smoke weed, and that's why I learned Sanskrit.
Shrooms and Sanskrit are the way forward. Neuroplasticity reintroduction.
Another great show, gentlemen. Right under the 2 hour mark, which is perfect. Catch you guys next week.
Right.
36 chamber of